Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of Mindset Shift. Our goal is still the same, for us to start thought-provoking conversations that will change your mindset, my mindset, so that we are able to be impactful within society and we are able to address challenges that we may be facing. Today is another amazing episode, and today we're going to talk about something very important. For a very long time, we've been given an equation that has operated for years, and an equation that even until today cannot be disputed. This is a simple equation of success. In the equation of success, we have been told that an individual ought to make sure that they put a prerequisite amount of effort and they mix that with resources. And those two variables mixed together over a period of time should produce success. And this has been working for so many people. And for so many years, we've seen that great men and women have used this particular equation and it has worked and has operated for years. But today we want to talk about something that adds up on that particular equation. Now, when one person has become successful, success is not the goal that humanity had if we go back to what identity and creation spoke about. Success has to go beyond just success, but has to get to a level and a dimension where we are able to title and deem that particular success as to impact. So there is a difference between an individual that grows to a stature of success and an individual that becomes impactful. Because when we talk of impact, we are now talking about something that has been generated from what an individual has managed to do, but that thing has actually gone out and is now affecting other human beings. And in affecting other human beings, what it is doing is it is also aiding the success of other human beings. Meaning to say that the equation that says now an individual ought to put effort and an individual ought to put resources. The moment a person is impactful, it actually makes it easier for individuals that are using the same equation to try and achieve certain things within their life. So how does one then become impactful? How does one then have purpose in the success that they do have? Now, for purpose and impact to be included in that particular equation, there are two other variables that ought to be discussed and that ought to be assessed. What these two variables do is they don't just make an individual successful, but what they do is they manage to keep an individual at a level of success, and their success begins to affect other people and it becomes purposeful. So when we say that the effort of an individual plus the resources equal to success, the moment we add two more variables, success still exists, but it exists at a higher dimension. And this is a dimension where we are able to talk of impact and we're able to talk of purposeful success. So the two variables that cannot be ignored and that ought to be addressed and individuals should understand are two variables which are relationships and understanding seasons. So when an individual applies effort and applies resources, but they also add to that within a space of time, understanding of relationships and understanding of times and seasons, that individual is able to amass and build what we call impact. Because impact also looks at the longitude of the success of an individual, but it also looks at the understanding of why an individual ought to be successful. So this is how we then get to impact. When you understand both relationships and you also understand the understanding of seasons, you will know that when you master one variable, you are able to now have an understanding of the next variable. So when you understand relationships in the road to success, then you're also then able to understand how those particular relationships are able to affect seasons and are able to give you understanding of seasons. And when you know seasons and you understand relationships, then you also know how to smartly address your efforts and your resources into placing them into an area where you will get returns. This is when most people now say in this particular generation, do not work hard, but work smart. Working smart is you understanding where to put your resources and your effort. And these two things are understood when you know relationships and when you know the understanding and the moving of seasons. So the first thing with relationships, when we talk of relationships, there are four fundamental relationships that every individual ought to understand. This then becomes a basic in terms of how to understand the idea of relationships, and then how understanding those particular relationships is able to contribute into understanding of seasons. And when you understand seasons, you are able to manipulate environments so that environments can give you the best output out of not putting a lot of resources and a lot of effort. So these four relationships, the first relationship that one ought to have, one ought to understand, this is the most important relationship that an individual can have, is the relationship with God. Now, the relationship with God is fundamental because it produces three things that are very important even in understanding seasons. The one thing that the relationship with God gives, it gives direction. The second thing that a relationship gives with God, it gives protection. And the last, if essential part of the relationship with God that is given to an individual is identity. So when you build a relationship with God, you are directed, you are protected, and you also understand identity. The importance of this is when you understand direction, you know a place and you know a time and you know a specific location that you ought to be when you are investing your time, when you're investing your energy, and we're investing your resources. Greener pastures are not areas that are green in nature, but greener pastures is everywhere an individual is directed but has got God within. That area becomes a greener pasture. Where do we see this? We see this when Abraham was with Lot and they had to now part ways. And Lot is the one that chose the first place that he was supposed to go to. And when Lot was looking to the physical eyes, he was seeing a land that was of greener pastures. But little did he understand, or little did he know, that what he titled greener pastures was actually a place that was going to be Sodom and Gomorrah. But we see Abraham, who looks at the side where he was directed by God. Though this place was not physically beautiful, but because he had been directed by God, that area became the greener pasture of Abraham. Because greener pasture was not the specific location, but greener pasture was the place in which God has directed you and God is with you. So this is very important in understanding your initial relationship with God. This relationship is built with intimacy. This relationship is built with consistency, and this relationship is built with understanding. You ought to have a genuine relationship with God, and you will receive direction. But above the direction, what you also receive and what you also gain is what we call protection. Where God is, He is able to create a hedge that protects you, that protects your resources, and also that protects what you are trying to build. If you're trying to build a company, you need to understand that there are resources that are placed for you to build that company. Lacking protection that is developed from a relationship with God may end up being you putting a lot of resources and a lot of efforts into a company that can be liquidated, and there are laws around that will end up bringing a loss to you. So when you've got protection, protection is also developed from direction, because the place in which God would have sent you, the place in which God would have directed you, the place in which God would have called a particular success, He also protects because it is a place that He Himself is part of. The Bible does say that except the Lord builds the house, they that build, they build in vain. So when you are building a house that you've been directed by God to build, it means that He has already set up a security system that protects whatever effort and that protects whatever you've placed in. So when you've got direction, immediately you get protection. The third thing that you do get, like we spoke about in your relationship with God, is identity. Identity is very essential when you are building success. Remember, the success of a man is a success that should outpour into the possibility of a success in another man. When a man's success is centralized to himself, that success cannot be considered as a success of impact, because impact can only occur when individuals around are also positively impacted by your success. So we don't exist in a kingdom, or we don't exist in callings where what we achieve is for us to find glory in ourselves. But we live in a kingdom where what we achieve is able to perpetuate the same nature into others. So the true success of an individual is not seen in what they amass, but is seen in what they have done to make others gain the same success. So this is only found in identity. Because you will see that in the identity that you receive from your relationship with God, you understand that every time when God raised a man, there were men that followed immediately to be impacted so that they can also be raised. So you ought to understand that your relationship with God is fundamental. When you are still missing it on all these other relationships, if your relationship with God is set, then you need to understand that you've got direction, you need to understand that you've got protection, and you also have identity. These three things, they are able to then help you in terms of understanding seasons. Because seasons occur in two manners. Seasons occur when the time is right for that particular season has come. But you are also able to manipulate certain elements so that when you manipulate them, even if the timing of the season is not yet there, but you are able to bring the same rewards that a season brings to that particular time. You are only able to do this when you understand the environment, when you understand the elements that ought to be put together so that you bring a season into fruition. So when you've got direction, direction comes with a location, direction comes with a time. When direction comes with a location and it comes with time, it means that at the right time that God shall take you there, you are able to understand that a season has come. But protection and identity also offers principles where you are able to align certain elements to bring a season into fruition. We see this even with scientists, that when it is the rainy season, they are able to tell that the rainy season is coming because of how they studied the climates, how they studied the change of seasons. But also we see that sometimes when it is out of season, they are able to manipulate certain elements. They are able to do water clouding so that they're able to bring the exact same conditions of a season at a particular time. So these two things, you are able to do them when you've got a relationship with God, because God offers direction, but he also offers principles that are able to make you understand how to develop a season. So building your relationship with God is part of the intimacy that you ought to have with him. But when you have intimacy with the Creator, you are going to rub off what that Creator can bring in terms of your work into success. So if you want to become a man of impact, if you want to become a woman of impact, then you ought to understand the importance of your relationship with God. The second important relationship that you ought to understand is your relationship with yourself. Now, these relationships, I've managed to place them in order of preference and also in order of importance. So after you understand a relationship with God, you build a relationship with God, which you will continue doing to the time of death. You also need to understand your relationship with yourself. Why is this very essential? It is because that when we are told how to love others, we are told that you ought to love others. But the example of how you ought to love others is defined by how you love yourself. So the Bible clearly states that love your neighbor as you love yourself, meaning to say the first love is the love of yourself as an individual. Then the reflection of how you love yourself reflects in others. An individual that does not love themselves cannot be successful in terms of loving others. When you fail to love yourself, you introduce seductiveness in you. You introduce certain qualities and certain traits in you that are not good in terms of how you handle other individuals. So in loving yourself, you ought to understand what is good for your body. In loving yourself, you ought to understand what is good for your spirit. Now, what is good for your body and what is good for your spirit is developed in such a way that you are now able to be at the best position to love others. So you ought to invest into yourself. You ought to build yourself up. You ought to understand what goes through your heart and what goes out of your mouth, because these things build who you are as an individual. You ought to take time for you to develop yourself. You ought to take time for you to build yourself. And you ought to take time for you to make sure that with you, you are well before you invest in others. Now, I've seen and I continue to see individuals that are so good in terms of encouraging other individuals, but they themselves, they don't have prerequisite knowledge as to how they're able to make the same things work for themselves. This is a problem of self-love. This is a problem of loving yourself. Loving yourself is not what it has been said within the society. So many people, they say that this person loves themselves, and you are excused from people that are valued in society. But it is very scriptural. It is very biblical. It is also scientifically good for an individual to love themselves enough. When you love yourself, you are able to remove certain things like pride in you. You are able to remove certain things that are affecting you. You're able to come to understanding of certain things that affect you. Because remember, when you want to be successful and you want to get to impact, you should not only know what takes you there, but also know what exists in you that can remove you from that place. And when you address these things, it is part of self-love to know that the things that can drop me from the top, I ought to deal with them whilst I'm making myself up to the top. So when you know that as you go to the top, there are things that can remove you from the top, you begin to have enough self-love in you to build yourself and come to an understanding that you drop those elements. So it is important for you to love yourself. The third relationship that is very essential is relationship with others. It is relationship with people. Now, these relationships, I've classified them in 4 different relationships. They are professional relationships, they are romantic relationships, they are relationships of friendship, and then there are also relationships of family. You would be shocked that the things that can actually keep a professional relationship, that keep a family relationship, that keep a romantic relationship, and that also keeps a friendship type of relationship, they are almost the same. These relationships, they are actually ordered by 2 principles. These are principles of value, and these are principles of gratitude. Whenever you are in a relationship, you ought to offer value. You ought to offer value that is built from an understanding of how you've loved yourself and how you've developed yourself enough for you to invest in a particular relationship. Value is very important in a relationship. What do you bring to the table? In a professional relationship, what is it that you offer your professional company? What is it that you offer your professional circle? What is it that you can do? This is actually developed from the first relationship, which is having a relationship with God, because these are some of the things that are revealed as you move and as you walk with God. God reveals gifts that you have. God reveals talents that you have. God reveals skills that you have. And these skills, these talents, these gifts, they can be orchestrated and brought as value to a table. So value in any relationship is important. Value in a professional relationship is important. Value in a friendship is important. Value in a romantic relationship is important. Value is very important. What is it that you are offering even in your romantic relationship? What is it that you offer to the second party? What is it that you offer to your loved one? What is it that you offer to a family? If you find yourself failing to offer anything in a relationship, when you see that your value is not to the height of the value given by another individual, then you have to be a man or a woman of gratitude. Gratitude is essential. Where you cannot place value, place gratitude. We have become a generation where we have forgotten the importance of gratitude. The importance of gratitude. Gratitude is also inclusive of honor. You ought to honor individuals in any relationship. You ought to be grateful. Gratitude is acknowledging everything an individual is doing, even if that is considered as their job, even if that is considered as what they are supposed to do. In a relationship with your family, your father is mandated that he ought to pay your school fees, but you ought to be grateful for what he is doing when you're unable to give value at that particular time. Gratitude is essential even in a romantic relationship. When your partner does something, when your partner does what you like, when your partner works hard, when your partner does, be grateful when you're not at a point of giving value. But when you mix value and you also mix gratitude, you are able to maintain a relationship with others. Why is a relationship with others important? Jesus Christ, a man that we believe in, a man that was called to die for us, that we may receive the salvation we have today. The most important gift that he was given was the gift of men. Jesus was given men in form of disciples to aid his walk on earth and to also aid the death and after the death. There are certain men that had to be placed in strategic positions so that what we call salvation today happens. Jesus had a relationship with men. He had a relationship with his disciples. You would be shocked that the importance of the relationship of Jesus and Judas brought salvation also. Because if Judas had not done what he had done, we would not have the Savior die on the cross and for us to receive salvation. So that was actually part of handling relationships and understanding relationships. Jesus also had a relationship with a man who was called Joseph of Arimathea. That is the man that had money, the man that had resources, the man that had influence, to buy the body of Jesus and place it in a tomb. All those things were there so that they can fulfill a prophetic word that had been said about Jesus. And most importantly, then bring the salvation we talk about today. So when you have relationship with men, what you are able to do is to access the blessing God has placed for you in the hands of men. You ought to benefit from the blessing God has for you that is within men. And when you understand the importance of men, you understand every time when a season is about to shift in your life, God will send a word, but God will also send a man. Because what a man brings is a man brings more resources. When God wants to make you a millionaire, many times he reveals your value, reveals your gift, but he always also reveals the presence of men. Men will bring something that will shift your season. Men will bring something that will tell you a season has changed. And men will come to turn around an existing situation. So your relationship with men is important. You ought to have genuine relationship with men. You ought to invest in relationships with men. You ought to understand that you have people around you. Because remember, if you are Jesus and you are in the boat with the disciples, when the storm comes, Jesus is about to arise and calm the storm. But also, if you have a man such as Jonah in your boat, you can lose everything because that man is in the wrong place and the wrong location. It will affect you. It will affect your resources. It will affect your effort. So in the equation of effort plus resources, if you mess up on relationships, if you mess up with your relationship with men, you will lose everything that you've placed as effort and everything that you've placed as resources. And you will certainly miss your season. The fourth relationship is your relationship with things. It's your relationship with elements around you. It's your relationship with money. It's your relationship with cars. It's your relationship with everything else. This is placed as number 4 because this is the least of importance when it comes to relationship. But it is not something that can be menial. You ought to have a relationship with everything that is around you. A relationship that considers the value, that considers the maintenance, but that also considers that your heart should not be within these things. Your heart rather should be with the things that produce what you have. So your heart should not be with the car that you've bought. Your heart should not be with the house that you've built. But your heart should be with what caused those things to come back. Because what makes you maintain what you have in your hands is not loving what you have in your hands, but it is loving and respecting what brought what is in your hands there. Because when you lose what is in the hands now, if you do not know what brought it, then you will not be able to recover it once it's lost. There was a man that took some bird eatings and he put them in his hands. After he took them, he went in a field. When he went in the field, so many birds began to come. They came, they began to eat what was in his hands. But after some time, they finished what was within the hands. And after they finished what was within the hands, the birds, they left. And the man was left alone. This is the wisdom of men too. When you now have things around you, understand that you're going to draw people towards you. But when you draw people towards you, the first things that people see are your results before they see you. So when your results are no longer there, the people will leave. So what is going to bring back the resources once you lose them is going back to your relationship with God, because that's where you got the resources. And when the resources are restored, you now have an understanding that what brings men are your results first. But what keeps men and what keeps you is going back to understand the relationship with God and the relationship with yourself. So it is very essential that in understanding seasons, we have a respect of what are called relationships. The importance now of understanding seasons cannot be looked down upon. There are men in the Bible that were said that these are men that understood seasons. The Bible tells us how they understood seasons through an understanding. And understanding comes from having knowledge pertaining what drives, what moves, and what brings seasons to pass. And when seasons are centered around relationships, you cannot ignore the part that relationships play. So as an individual, go and fix your relationships. You do not have a money problem. You have a relationship problem. You do not have a divorce problem. You do not have an issue with the government. You do not have an issue. Your problem is you have got a relationship problem. Go and build your relationships. Fortify your relationship. Bring intimacy in your relationship. Intimacy is built on consistency, and intimacy is built on how much you are able to invest within that particular relationship. And remember, where you are able to not bring value in a relationship, always bring gratitude. Gratitude is going to keep all your relationships, and gratitude is going to assist you. Thank you very much for the time that you have taken for you to listen to this episode. We continue to try and bring thought-provoking messages that will get you and that will get I talking. But the most important thing is that we develop a mindset that is able to impact society and contribute to society. Do not forget to leave your comments. Tell us what you think about what we're discussing. Tell us what we can talk about. Help us with some information that you may also have. Because remember, no man is an epitome of knowledge. But what I know combined with what you know builds the ultimate knowledge that can help us become better people, better citizens, but most importantly, become men and women of influence and impact. Thank you very much. Till we meet in the next episode.